Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's PD on Autism Acceptance. I am Jen Biddick. I am one of the supervisors of special education here in Egg Harbor Township. And one of my main roles is to supervise our self-contained classrooms for MD students. We're going to start off by talking about what is autism. And this quote below has always really spoken to me because whenever I introduce myself to somebody and I say I work with children with autism, quite often I get a story or an anecdote about how that person knows someone with autism, maybe through a relative or a friend of a friend. And what I find is so important for us to remember is if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. Individuals with autism are different and unique from one another. So just because you might know something or a lot about one person with autism, that doesn't mean that you know everything about every person with autism. So it's always so important for us to remember that, again, all individuals are unique. They're all different. And it's so important for us to continue to learn about them as individuals and to continue to learn more. So we're going to start off with a definition of autism spectrum disorder. This has changed in recent years with the newest publication of the DSM, or the Diagnostics and Statistics Manual. So we're on the DSM-5 right now. And in this version of the DSM, there are two main symptoms or criteria for autism spectrum disorder. They are deficits in social communication and social interaction, as well as restricted, repetitive patterns of behavior, interest, or activities. So again, those two main areas or criteria: deficits in social communication, and social interactions, as well as those restricted, repetitive patterns of behavior, interest, or activities. So the DSM also now looks at autism spectrum disorder across 3 levels of severity. Level 3 is requiring the most substantial support. Level 2 is still requiring a substantial level of support. And level 1 is requiring support. Now, as some of you may know, in previous versions of the DSM, there were other syndromes listed under the category of autism spectrum disorder. That has changed in recent years. So, for example, Asperger's syndrome used to be included under autism spectrum disorder. In the newest publication of the DSM, there no longer is Asperger's syndrome. Rather, people that had previously been diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome would most likely be diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder at that level 1, requiring support. Other diagnoses that no longer are provided are PDD-NOS, which was pervasive developmental disorder, not otherwise specified. Now, all of those fall under autism spectrum disorder. So I want to just dive in a little bit deeper into each part of that definition. So the first was difficulties in social communication. So this does not mean that children can't talk. In fact, only about 40% of individuals with autism are non-vocal, which means they can't speak with their vocal cords. So that means that 60% of individuals with autism are vocal. So people that are not vocal might use a different form or an augmentative form of communication. That might be a low-tech item such as PECS, which is the Picture Exchange Communication System. So that's when they might use picture icons that they would exchange with you. So they would pick up the icon, reach, and release it into your hand in order to communicate their wants, needs, things that they see, hear, or smell in the environment. They might also use a more technology enabled device like an iPad or another device in which they would do the same thing, where they would point or touch to pictures and icons to make requests or label items in their environment, answer questions, etc. Some individuals with autism might also use sign language. Some individuals might be able to use vocal language and may have that as their primary form of communication, but they might have some difficulties with articulation, which is not a symptom or characteristic of autism. It's another comorbid factor that may be present. And is also really important. Again, that social communication, individuals very often demonstrate challenges using their language effectively. So using it functionally, using it to have conversations with others, and using it across social contexts. Challenges with social skills. One of the more common or stereotyped deficits for learners with autism is often limited eye contact. However, this is not true for every autistic individual. Some individuals might require extra time to approach or respond to less familiar people. So if you are coming into a classroom and you're a newer person and you're not getting a whole lot of responses or anyone coming up to you or maybe even attending to you, that is not unusual for some of our learners. And many of our learners may also have difficulties interacting with peers. Behaviors. This might include interacting or playing with objects in different ways than we may expect. So, for example, turning the car upside down and spinning the wheels, lining objects up in a very specific manner, gazing at certain parts of objects. Some individuals with autism might engage in stereotypy, which is a word that we use to describe non-contextual or repetitive motor movements or vocalizations. So stereotypy could include rocking back and forth, hand flapping, doing other idiosyncratic movements with hands, legs, arms. It might also include vocalizations. Sometimes that might just be a repeated sound or word. Sometimes it might be what we call echolalia, which is sometimes delayed repetition of words or phrases that they've heard before in the environment. But again, it's often to us or to different observers non-contextual, and it is repetitive. Behaviors could also include aggression, eloping, which is leaving the immediate area. So in a classroom, it would be the instructional area. Out in the community, it might just be the area around where their family or caregiver is. It might also include self-injurious behaviors. And those could take many different forms or topographies. So topography is what the behavior looks like. So that could include hitting, kicking, scratching, biting, even headbanging to others and or oneself. So just a few more facts about autism before we move on. Based on data collected in 2016, the CDC, Centers for Disease Control, reported that 1 in 54 children in the United States are diagnosed with autism. In New Jersey, it is the highest prevalence in the country. That number is 1 in 32, which is 3.1% of 8-year-olds that they surveyed at this time. They do find that boys are diagnosed 4 times as often as girls, and they find that it does not matter your socioeconomic status, your ethnicity, or race. So it is present across many different types of backgrounds. What's also really important for us as we move forward in today's PD is that people with autism have a wide range of skill levels. So there's some more data here. So some students might be working on age or grade level skills. So if we look down at our data, 47% of individuals with autism have IQ scores in the average to above average range. 28% are in the borderline range, and 25% do have an intellectual disability, which would be an IQ equal to or less than 70%. So some students might be working below grade level on prerequisite skills. Some students might be variable across different skill areas. They might have certain strengths in one area, but need improvement in different areas. Like I said before, kids with autism, adults with autism have a wide range of personalities and interests. All of our students are unique. Just like us, all of the students in our classrooms, all the students that we're interacting with have likes and dislikes, personalities, a sense of humor, favorite things, not so much favorite things. And that is what is so important for us to remember in April for Autism Acceptance Month, as well as all year round. So how do we respond to that as a school district, all these different ranges of skill levels? So there is a continuum of services that's provided in Egg Harbor Township and in most school districts. So we have our most restrictive level for students that have that more severity of skills in that diagnosis. So we have what we call an out-of-district placement. However, in Egg Harbor Township, we have made a commitment to educate as many of our learners in district as possible. And to that effect, we have had an MD program here for many years that goes from the preschool level all the way up through high school, and then through transition to adulthood through age 21. And that right now, all those classrooms are called MD, or multiply disabled classrooms. After that, we have our Learning Resource Center, or a pull-out resource. We have our ICR, or in-class resource, and then we have the other end of the spectrum, the least restrictive environment that we have available, the general education classroom. And we have students with autism in each of these placements in our district. And I just want to make a quick note that some of our MD classrooms are going to be labeled a little bit differently next year. So some of our classrooms will be labeled as autism classrooms. Some will remain labeled as MD, again, multiply disabled classrooms. Some will be labeled as BD, which stands for behavior disorder. And some will be labeled as LLD, which is language and learning disabled. And again, so across all those different types of classrooms, there may be learners with autism, as well as learners with other developmental disabilities. Now I just want to talk very quickly about, again, that wide range of skill level, some famous people or some very successful people with autism. The first here, many of you may have heard her name before. This is Dr. Temple Grandin. She is an individual with autism. She has a PhD in animal science, and she is a very influential autism spokesperson. She has spoken at length about her experiences as a child with autism, as well as how she has continue to develop and succeed as an adult with autism. We also have Satoshi Tajiri. He invented Pokemon. So he has autism, and his interest led him to invent something really cool to very, very, very many people. We also have Anthony Ianni. He's a national championship winning basketball player. He played college basketball. And when he was diagnosed with autism, the doctors told his family that he was not going to do well in school, that he was not going to graduate high school, and definitely wasn't going to go to college, and definitely also was not going to be an athlete. And he proved all of those people wrong. And now he's also a motivational speaker. We also have Sir Anthony Hopkins. He's an actor. His diagnosis previously was Asperger's, so now he falls under Autism Spectrum. And he has been quoted saying that he does enjoy being around people, but he doesn't often go to different parties or events because those situations just may be a little bit different for him. And then finally, we have Tony DeBlois. He is a musician. I believe he's a jazz musician. He is blind and has an autism diagnosis. And he, I believe, from memory, knows 600 or 800 songs by memory that he can play. So while he may have two things that many people would have said, he is not going to be able to do things, he proves that he can do things. And he is an example, again, of one of my favorite things to say is not to focus on what a child can't do, but to look at what they can do. So that should definitely be our focus in April for Autism Acceptance, again, as well as the entire year. So don't focus on what a student can't do, look at what they can do. Because if all you see is autism, you will miss kids that are funny, smart, kind, endearing, intelligent, all different things under the sun. So what I want all of you to do right now is that one person or those many people that you know with autism, I want you to think about one awesome thing, one awesome quality, or one awesome skill that they can do. So if all you see is autism, you will miss, and you fill that in for yourself. And again, remember that in April for Autism Acceptance, but also all year round. So this next section of today's presentation is a little bit difficult for me because it has been, for sure, a mindset shift for me and possibly for a lot of you too. So as a professional, I find that it is always important to be learning more, to be reading different voices in the community, to be looking at the most recent research to make sure that you're practicing the most innovative strategies. And what I have looked at over this past year is to also listen to the voices of people with disabilities, because they're going to teach us a lot of things about how we can help advocate for them appropriately. And so this mindset shift is speaking to just that. So as you guys have heard me saying, this April, we are celebrating Autism Acceptance. We are not celebrating autism awareness. And we're also going to be supporting organizations that support the autism community. So in the past, I don't know about you guys, but I for sure have very often donated in April to Autism Speaks. I've donated money, bought shirts, bracelets, done walks, 5K virtual runs, all different things. And recently, a lot of teenagers and adults with autism have spoken out about Autism Speaks. They have shown that a lot of the funding that they receive and does not actually go towards individuals with autism. And also their mission is to end autism or change autistic people. And people with autism have spoken out and said, but I don't need to be changed. There's not a cure. We don't want to end autism. This is who I am, and I embrace who I am. And because of those statements, it's so important for us to take a step back and to listen to that. So again, I don't know about you, but I have 15 years worth of t-shirts for Lighted Up Blue with puzzle pieces. And, just because I have all of that, just because I've spent so many years accumulating all of that, wearing all that, being proud to support that, doesn't mean that I should continue doing it if, again, the community that I am trying to serve and advocate for is telling me this does not serve me. So they have asked that we wear red instead and that we celebrate neurodiversity. So red represents love, good luck, joy, celebration. So that is why they chose that color. And neurodiversity, just to celebrate all the ways that we are all diverse as human beings. And so that is a rainbow. And that's why you're seeing that infinity symbol on a lot of my slides with the rainbow infinity symbol. That is for neurodiversity. So again, this year, I challenge you to change your mindset, to do that shift, to listen to the voices that we are working so hard to support and advocate for, wear red instead, and celebrate neurodiversity or neurodivergence. This one is also difficult for me. For so many years, I have made extra sure that I have always used person first language. That is what is written into the IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And as professionals, we are very much encouraged to speak with person first. So students with autism language, as we are told that was the most respectful way. But again, the community is speaking out and they're saying that, that makes it as if they are ashamed of their autism. And while, yes, they are people first, they are also autistic. So what I encourage you to do is, as you are speaking with families, as you are speaking with students, if they refer to themselves as an autistic person, or if they are comfortable with that, that is okay. If you still feel comfortable using that person first language, that's okay too. But if someone with autism or a family member of someone with autism corrects you and asks you to say it in a different way, it's so important that we respect that and we change with them. But regardless of whether you say person with autism or autistic person, what's so important is to continue to remember they're people first. So instead of just saying, oh yeah, the autistic student, learn their name. Remember that they are a person and they deserve that respect and dignity, just like any other student. So refer to them just like you would any other student or class, Miss Jen's class, the first graders. So again, just remember that they're people first. They have names, whether we use that person first language or we use the word autistic. So now we're going to start talking about our interactions with people with autism or autistic people. Again, it's a mindset shift for me. Just because they can't express it. So again, a lot of our learners had challenges with social communication. Some of them may also be non-vocal, but that doesn't mean, even if they're non-vocal, even if they have an intellectual disability, does not mean they're not listening. It does not mean they're not feeling. It does not mean they're not thinking. It does not mean they're not understanding. And because of that, it is so important that we, again, are continuing to treat them with dignity and respect, remembering that our words matter and our actions matter. If we are talking about a student, again, whether they understand the vocabulary terms or not, they still understand our tone. They understand our nonverbal behavior. And it is so important to be around our students, all of our students, with autism, without autism, with dignity and respect. It's also an important note that some individuals, as part of those deficits in social communication and social interactions, some of them have a difficult time understanding sarcasm. So it's really important that we are careful not to use certain sarcastic terms or idioms just because they might take what we say very, very literally. And this does not mean that autistic individuals don't have a sense of humor or can't joke around. But again, we have to remember that they're children and that might not be the most appropriate way to interact with them. This is a quote from Rita Pierson, who later on you'll see another quote that she made, "Every child needs a champion." So if you've heard that one before, this is the same woman. And so she said, "A colleague said to me, they don't pay me to like the kids. They pay me to teach a lesson. I should teach it. They should learn it. Case closed." And her response was, "Well, kids don't learn from people they don't like." In a later PD, I hope to talk to you guys a lot about something in applied behavior analysis that we call pairing, which the main goal of pairing is to have learners that want to be around you so that they can learn from you. Kids don't learn from people they don't like. Think about your history as a student and think about the teachers that you learned most from, the teachers that you still remember today. They probably weren't the teachers that were a little bit rougher around the edges. For the most part, they were the teachers that made you feel safe and respected in school. So remember, kids don't learn from people they don't like. So be mindful. Someone is always listening, whether that's the autistic students. So please, 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 please don't talk about students in front of them. This has always been a huge goal of mine, and especially when you're in a classroom with a teacher and paraprofessionals and maybe you have to communicate, it's so, so important to make sure that you're not talking about the students in front of them. So having a private way or even sometimes abbreviations or acronyms to talk about certain behaviors, or if you need to, going to the side or in the hallway to have those conversations. Also remember, again, someone is always listening. We have other students in the classrooms with us, in the hallways with us, in specials, in lunch. You are a role model. If you talk about other students with respect and dignity, so are they. I saw some numbers over the weekend that 2/3 of students with autism report being bullied. So again, someone is always watching. Be a role model to all of the students in our community, that it is important to not talk about others in front of them, and also to talk about others with respect. And also remembering that there are families, maybe not now because of COVID, but there's often families in our buildings, there's families out in the community. And even if, the day has ended, you're in the hallway after dismissal, there might be somebody in the building that knows the student that you're talking about. So please don't have conversations out in the open. Maintain confidentiality, which is extremely important with all of our special education students. I'll tell you a quick story from my time at Rutgers University. Any of you that has ever been up to Rutgers, there's a big busing system that goes back and forth between all the campuses. And In our program, we also had what was called an undergraduate fieldwork course. So we had an undergraduate fieldworker that got on the bus, and I believe she might have just been on the phone talking to somebody on the phone about a student. But she was very specific about that student's behavior. She never used the name. But because that student engaged in very idiosyncratic behaviors that were very specific to him, his cousin was sitting right behind her on the bus and heard the whole thing. So again, someone is always listening. Don't talk about the students, not in front of them, and as much as you can, not ever. So just please always be aware of your surroundings. You never know who is listening. I also just want to give a word of encouragement. You got this. For a lot of our staff that just came back into the building, 4 days on, 1 day virtual, for those of you that might have students that have IEPs, may have autism, may have other disabilities, I'm sure that with these changes, there are going to be hard days. For our MD teachers, which if we can all just give a round of applause to our MD teachers, they have been here 5 days a week, pretty much since the beginning of the school year. So a round of applause to them. There are going to be hard days. There are going to be challenging behaviors. Take a deep breath. Stay calm. I know, easier said than done, but it's so important for us to just always remain calm and ask for help if you need it. Even when a student is having a challenging behavior, that does not make it appropriate at that time to let them know that you're frustrated, or to say something that might not be respectful to them, like, oh, I don't have time for this, or oh, you're in such a mood today. We need to be really mindful of how we're communicating with our children. Again, I want you to go back, step out of that situation, put yourself in your own shoes when maybe you're not having the best of days. And when someone says to you, oh, you're in a mood today, does that make your mood better? Or does that maybe escalate you and make your mood even worse? So again, talk to our kids with respect and dignity. Take a deep breath, stay calm, ask for help if you need it. You got this. And then also, don't forget to celebrate. There's going to be great days. No milestone is too small. Don't forget to celebrate your students, and don't forget to celebrate you and all of your hard work. I have another story about no milestone is too small. So I have had a lot of students of mine, even students that were in out-of-district placement with me, who were able to go from an out-of-district placement, so that the most restrictive end of that continuum of services, all the way back into their school system, into a general education environment. Huge, huge success. I've also had students that required a much more substantial level of support. So I had one student, he was a preschooler. When he entered my classroom, he did not make eye contact. He did not demonstrate a lot of awareness of the people around him. He ate very few foods. He had a blanket with him all day. He was not toilet trained. He was not able to imitate actions. He was not able to match. He was not able to communicate. He had no mode of communication. And again, this was an out-of-district placement. Within a year, through a lot of hard work from him and through a lot of creativity and trying new things from myself and my team, when his school district came back to observe him, they said, oh my gosh, he's a completely different kid. And now he still was not able to match. He was still working on potty training. He still had his blanket around him a lot of the time, not all the time. But one of the things that we had really, really worked on was his awareness of other people. And so now when someone walked into the room, he oriented to them. He made eye contact. He smiled. Sorry. He was socially aware. So while there were still a lot of things that he could not do, there was that thing that he could do. And it was such a huge thing, because within development, oh, excuse me, I'm so sorry, guys. We call that a behavioral cusp. That means that skill made him enter a whole new world, and that changed everything for him. That enabled him to be able to imitate, that enabled him to be able to watch things and try them on his own, which is a huge part of learning, observational learning, which is how a lot of us learn so many things. Think about going on to, you have to fix your sink. You go onto YouTube, you watch a video, and that's how you figure out how to do it. So that small milestone was not too small. It was huge for him, his family. He was able to have relationships with his mom, his older sister, and all of us as his educators. Oh, sorry, guys. All right. So we're going to move on now, and we're going to talk about applied behavior analysis, which a lot of our MD programs utilize applied behavior analysis, not all of them. And as we move forward and some of our programs have different labels, our autism programs will utilize applied behavior analysis. So what is applied behavior analysis, which you might hear people call it ABA? So applied A, behavior, B, analysis, A. It's a science in which the principles of behavior are systematically applied to improve socially significant behaviors to a meaningful degree, and then demonstrated to be responsible for those changes in behaviors. So the pieces that I want us to really focus on here are: 1, ABA is a science. 2, we're looking at socially significant behavior. And those socially significant behaviors might be different for different learners. Because what's significant for one learner may not be as significant for another in their family. And then also that meaningful degree. So what level of improvement are we looking for? Oops. So again, ABA is a science. It's not just DTI, which stands for discrete trial instruction, or sometimes you'll hear DTT, discrete trial training. It's not just trials. It's not just using food. It's not just behaviors. It's not just for autism. In fact, there is a portion of applied behavior analysis, or a subcategory of applied behavior analysis, that's called organizational behavior management, or OBM, and is used by large organizations in order to increase the productivity and work habits of their employees. So the principles of ABA can be used to increase or teach behaviors or decrease behaviors. And those principles must be systematically and consistently applied for behavior change to happen successfully. So when we are practicing ABA, you might not see behavior change in 1 day, 2 days. Behavior change takes time. And again, I'm just going to keep saying it, ABA is a science. And so we practice ABA. We are practitioners, and it's just so important. Again, just like in the field of autism right now, that we are, evaluating our position as professionals, and we are listening to the autism community so that we can be better advocates for them. As practitioners of ABA, it's also important for us to constantly step back and evaluate our practices and make sure that we are on the cutting edge, that we are following ethical guidelines, and that we are truly implementing the best practice for our learners. Within ABA, a lot of times there is very intensive teaching involved. Not all the time. You can have ABA without discrete trial training. And because of that, and because of challenging behaviors, a lot of times the staffing in our classrooms, we have a much higher staff to student ratio than you might in a resource room or in a general education setting. So sometimes you might even see that there's one teacher and then there's one paraprofessional for each student. And that, again, is to meet the needs of each of our learners. And before we move on, I just want to touch on some of the challenging behaviors that staff is also required to help manage. So again, we have eloping, which is leaving the instructional area or leaving the area of safety; aggression, which can take many different forms or topographies; self-injurious behavior, which can also take many different forms or topographies; disruption, which may include, just throwing or tearing paper. It could include disrupting furniture, or even property destruction. as well, again, that stereotypy or restricted or repetitive behaviors, interests, and activities. So some of our challenging behaviors, well, let me just pause for a moment. Sorry about that. So some of the challenging behaviors, if you are not working in one of our MD classrooms right now, you may see or hear things that are a little bit confusing if you're not sometimes familiar with working with students that have challenging behaviors. And what I want everybody to know is that, again, as professionals, it is top priority to keep our students safe and to keep our staff safe. And to respond in an ethical manner. And again, this is something that we're constantly evaluating so that we are treating our learners with respect and dignity and the care that they deserve. So right now we are in the process of looking at how to provide new and additional training on some of the physical techniques that we sometimes need to use because of COVID. That has been challenging for to plan for, but we are looking, again, always to keep everybody safe. So if you do see challenging behaviors, again, just know that we do take ethical considerations into mind every single day, and that the staff that is intervening does have very specific training. So if you see a student engaging in a challenging behavior, what can you do? Well, 2 weeks ago, I did a training on best practices for preventing and de-escalating behavior. So I would definitely recommend going to our PD channel and watching that. But what you can do, you can stay calm. Please don't draw attention to the behavior. Some of our learners engage in behaviors in order to access attention. And while we might think that being yelled at or reprimanded is something that we don't want to experience, some of our learners may just take that as attention, and whether it's good attention or bad attention, it's still attention, and that could actually increase the likelihood of the behavior in the future in order to get at that attention again. Something else is ignore the behavior, not the student. So we can still be making sure that the student is safe, but we're not going to specifically talk to them about the behavior. We're not going to specifically address the behavior, again, while still maintaining safety. If you see a problem behavior occurring, remember to just take a deep breath. Remember to interact with the student with dignity and respect. Again, it can get hard for you, for the student, but remaining calm, treating the student with dignity and respect is going to help you to implement some of those best practice strategies that I talked about in my training 2 weeks ago, and to implement them calmly and professionally to most effectively de-escalate the situation. What other things can you do when working with a student with autism? So again, some of our staff in the MD programs, you might already know some of this. Some of our staff in other settings, so maybe in a resource room setting, maybe in specials or at the high school in electives, maybe a general education teacher in an in-class resource room. What types of things can you do if a student with autism is placed, or an autistic student is placed in your room? Or even as paraprofessionals, if you are just starting out, what can you do? So the first thing that I can encourage you to do is wait for the student to attend to you. And this might look different for different students. Our end goal is to have the students oriented to us with their hands in their lap and ready to work. But again, for some students, that might look a little bit different. As I said before, some of our learners have challenges with communication, and that includes not only expressing themselves, but sometimes language processing as well. So it's really important to provide clear, concise directions. Use the language that's most important. So for example, instead of saying, hey, can you get your pencil out and write your name at the top? Just say, write your name. That has a much better chance of the student being able to follow the direction than a much wordier instruction. Just like a lot of learners with autism respond to having information presented in multiple modalities. Visual cues are very effective for a lot of our learners. So that might be a visual schedule, which could be as long as a full daily schedule or as short as just the schedule for a specific activity. So, for example, an art activity, the step-by-step process. It could be a token board, a rule card, all different things. Modeling a task or behavior. So I talked about observational learning before, but again, this is providing multiple modalities of input. So let's say that you're in a gym class. If you not only tell the students to do jumping jacks, but you also show them, there's a greater chance that the students are going to be able to follow along. For longer tasks, break the tasks into smaller component parts. If you can, turn activities into discrete or close-ended tasks, so something that has a clear beginning and end. So maybe instead of just we're going to do our math work, we're going to do 5 math problems. So instead of it being something that maybe that's very overwhelming to the learner, now it is discrete. Now I know exactly what I have to do to finish the task. I need to complete 5 math problems. If you can, intersperse previously learned skills or easier mastered skills with new and harder skills so that the learner is able to meet some success in that review and then work on the harder stuff. Then go back to needing some success with that review, work on the harder stuff, build that momentum, build that success. Utilize reinforcement. So reinforcement is something that occurs after a response or behavior. So let's say that you answer a math problem correctly, you provide praise. That praise is a reinforcement for the behavior of answering the math problem correctly. And if that praise, it serves as a reinforcer for the student, that means that in the future, they're going to answer more math problems correctly. I also encourage you to catch the students being good. There's a lot of good behavior that sometimes as educators we take for granted. So even just sitting in a chair, walking in line nicely, all of those things that might seem really little and really easy to us are really hard for some of our learners. So catch them being good, provide that praise. And finally, what can you do when working with students with autism? You can believe in them. Set the bar high. Again, reach for the stars. Every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them and who understands the power of connection and insists that they can become the best they can possibly be. This is what we are all here to do. So again, this month, think about the learner, the learners, the children, the adults, the people in your life that you know with autism. And remember, if all you see is autism, you will miss fill in that blank. Celebrate Autism Acceptance. There's going to be some cool stuff coming out for the month of April. I hope that you all learned something new today, and I will see you next time. Bye.